am in the process of planning my exit strategy after discovering that my fiancé had been snooping on me for years. Everything from the outside set my life as perfect. I worked as a marketing executive, which is a great job in my eyes. I also had a nice apartment in the city along with my dreamy fiancé, Nick. We had been together for 5 years where my friends constantly told me that he is the great guy. He was always attentive and thoughtful, and always seemed to know what I needed before I even opened my mouth. My friends used to be envious over my relationship, saying, "He is the stud, Laura. You are so lucky." As it turns out, I did think that was the case, but Nick slowly ended up revealing himself and cracks started to show in my beautifully crafted way of life. My perfect life started to show cracks when, at first, details began to reveal themselves that did not add up. Nick, for some reason, always knew my whereabouts without me telling him. He would send me a message stating the exact coffee I had prior even before I used to tell him. Additionally, he began to purchase random gifts which included items I used to look for but never made a purchase for. All of these factors resulted in me dismissing it as mere coincidence. However, with each passing day, the peculiarities began to stack, and things commenced feeling disturbing instead of flattering. One night, after work, I was sitting on my couch to unwind when I got a text from Nick. "I'm aware that your day has been tough, so I placed an order for your favorite food. It's already on the way." His concern was touching, but the truth is, I never told him a single detail regarding my busy day. In reality, I was working late and never mentioned it to him. I tried to dismiss that dreadful feeling in my gut, convincing myself that this is all part of deep relationships. After all, it's normal for couples who have spent a long time together to anticipate each other's feelings, right? But still that feeling didn't go away. It was as though Nick was privy to secrets he was not meant to know. A few weeks beyond that, something took place that validated my greatest fears. Nick was away for business, and I was browsing through some old images on my phone. That's when I saw it, a gallery of photos that I had no recollection of capturing. My heart skipped a beat when I tapped on it. There were dozens of photos of me, and some were blurry, some were from across the street, outside my office, or when I was out and about. The dates on the images went back for years, all the way back from when Nick and I first dated. As I stared at these images, my hands trembled. I didn't remember taking these pictures at all. I didn't even see the person who captured them. But the most unsettling thing was the timestamps. Nick hadn't been with me during those times, or so I thought. I tried convincing myself that there was a reasonable explanation, that maybe I had simply forgotten or that Nick had captured those images as a sweet gesture. However, deep inside I always felt like something was off. I went even further back and came across more photos of me, monotonous activities like going for a walk, spending time at a cafe, or shopping for groceries. He had begun tracking me long before I knew. And at that instant is when I realized Nick wasn't the perfect fiancé. He had spied on me for years. He was a stalker. I was left stunned, my thoughts racing. How long has this been going on? Why haven't I noticed? The man I thought I loved, the man I was set to marry, had strategically constructed our relationship on a bed of deceit. Now, I have no clue how far his obsession goes. But one thing is clear, I cannot stay. It's time for me to get out of this relationship, and I need to do it without him knowing. For the next few days, it felt like I was entrenched in a horror story of my own making. With each look Nick gave me, or touch to my body, or even when he uttered, "I love you," I felt like screaming. Why was I so blind to his reality? How had I not seen that he had started overriding my autonomy from the very start? I felt suffocated. From the very first word that came out of my mouth to each action that I took, scrutiny was guaranteed. I started to question if it was only pictures he had access to. Had he hacked into my phone? Or my laptop? Or even my email account? The paranoia set in fast, and soon I was questioning every aspect of my life. Confronting him was impossible, and in this case, I knew it was impossible. If Nick was as unhinged as my thoughts led me to believe, if there was even one chance that he had been spying on me for years, confronting him would bring danger to my doorstep. I did not know what he was capable of. So I went with the story. I acted like nothing had changed. Whenever he kissed me, I smiled. I laughed whenever he made a joke. I behaved like life was normal. But deep down, I was hatching a plan to leave. It was necessary for me to think ahead. Should Nick be hunting me, he would know of my every step, making it difficult for me to make a sudden dash. I could not just get up and leave at a moment's notice. I first had to collect proof, ensure my exit was executed smoothly, and that there was a route that would allow me to disappear irreversibly. I took measures that were incremental that Nick wouldn't recognize. I secured a new bank account under a new name, slowly taking a percentage from my salary every week. Purchased a cheap, second-hand burner cell phone and stashed it inside my car, far from Nick's reach. Initiated the process of researching how to change my identity, stating a new residence, and severing all connections. With every new detail that came to mind, there was a face of fear that loomed over me. Was it possible Nick had already thought that I might try to leave? The levels of his surveillance could be extreme where I am under constant watch. Day and night I was consumed. Even trust my friends was not an option, as I did not know if Nick was listening to conversations or reading my messages. Then, one dreaded night, there was something that made me cross the limits. After Nick spent a night on the town with his buddies, I stayed back alone at the apartment. I knew I shouldn't do it, but looking through Nick's stuff was simply too daring to turn down. I was dying to find out how much did his spying went. My nightmare became reality when I opened my Nick's laptop. I wasn't prepared what I would get myself into. There were folders after folders stacked filled with photos, videos, and documents related to me. He even had recordings of every single conversation we had, emails I sent to my workplace, and even private messages I exchanged with my friends. Lies were inscribed upon lies, and Nick had me blinded. Nick was monitoring every aspect of my life, everything. Texts, emails, private conversations, you name it. Unbeknownst to me, Nick had been pulling the strings behind a curtain. After scrolling through Nick's endless files claiming my life as his own, it finally dawned on me how wrong this whole situation was. I felt nauseous as shocking emotions devastated me. Here I am being treated like a rat in a lab, an outcome in a sadistic experiment, and I made myself believe that I had a life. It hit me that I have always been owned by him. From every small decision I made to every feeble act I did out in the world, came with Nick's tight grip on me observing. It was time for me to go. I needed to get out, and fast. In case you haven't followed along to our channel, we would recommend you do so. If you have subscribed, then congratulations. You will have access to all the interesting stories whenever you wish to watch and listen. Leaving was not as easy as simply stepping out of the front door. Nick had interwoven himself into every aspect of my life. Our finances were tied together. The lease of the apartment we lived in was under his and my name, and he had all of my personal information. If I did anything wrong, he would know. I had to be strategic. I needed to be very careful. All the while, I needed to ensure that Nick didn't suspect anything at all. I devised a plan in which I faked being more involved in our relationship. I started cooking his favorite meals and smiling during conversations. I even suggested a weekend getaway to reconnect. At the same time, I started collecting all the resources I required for my plan. I reached out to an old college friend, Samantha, who lived across the country. I told her the situation in vague terms since Nick might have been spying on my messages, but she understood enough to let me stay with her. It's time to start using the laptop monitoring features I managed to get my hands on. First, I snapped some screenshots of his folders, transferred a few files to a flash drive, and documented my findings. My intention was to secure evidence in case I needed to liaise with law authorities, but mostly it was to calm my thoughts, or at least I hoped it would be sufficient to assure me that I was not insane. Being on the constant dread of being exposed was somewhat difficult. Nick's gaze felt penetrating at holiday gatherings, so I strongly suspected he knew about my grotesque actions. The buzzing of my phone increased my worries. What if it was Nick texting me to declare that he had uncovered everything? But succumbing to fear was never an option. The final part of the plan was the simplest: get out the house and look for a new place while Nick was away. The 2-day conference he was speaking at is in another city, so he will be quite busy covering this. This arranged his schedule perfectly. I could barely contain my glee while planning escape because he wouldn't be around, and I could leave from the house without gathering all my belongings. Only what was required to feel comfortable will do. Ahead of his trip, I was rather restless. I propped myself against the bed next to him with my heart profusely beating while staring at the ceiling. I jumped with every noise and felt the sheets rustle instilled fear within me. I had to remind myself that this was almost done, and I had the chance to escape soon. Nick was given a kiss, and then a goodbye. As soon as he left, I got to work. The Brockaway phone was shoved in my pocket as I made my way to the car while grabbing the bag I packed a few days back. My heart was pounding as each mile I put between us made me feel more liberated. I was euphoric, but terrified that Nick would end up discovering me. I had been driving for hours, my eyes glued to the road, and my hands clenched around the steering wheel. The plan on paper was easy: drive to Samantha's house, swap my phone, end all communication with Nick, and vanish into thin air. But the further I got away from the city, the more my anxiety kicked in. What if my cover wasn't good enough? What if Nick was following me the whole time? My phone started buzzing as I crossed the state line. A feeling of dread washed over me. It was a message from Nick. My heart sank even more. I know what you're doing. You can't run from me, Laura. As I glanced down at the text, my hands started shaking uncontrollably. How did he figure this out? I was so careful with everything, so meticulous, but he knew somehow. My panic turned into adrenaline as I smashed the gas pedal and the car shot forward with my head spinning. What if he was following me? What if this was his whole plan? I checked my rearview mirror every few seconds, expecting to see his car right behind me and pacing towards me, but the road was free. Maybe this was all in my head, a desperate attempt for him to scare me into submission. He won't be getting in my head so easily. I exited the highway and pulled over at a gas station. I needed to gather myself because I was sure I was close, but now I felt far from freedom. Sitting in my car, panic and fatigue crashed over me like a heavy wave. What was stopping me from just running away? My life had been at his mercy for as long as I could remember. Every single move I made was tracked and mapped out for him to oversee. The best part? I had no idea the lengths that he had gone to, which was by far the scariest part. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to calm down and lift my spirits. I'd nearly lost hope, but I was so close. All I had to do was keep pushing forward. I quickly texted Samantha. I noticed she wasn't online, which made me feel a little more reassured about sending it. I immediately deleted it afterwards because there was no need to take chances with Nick tracking my phone. I knew I was smarter than him. I just needed to stay one step ahead. Despite constantly repeating to myself that I was free and finally had control, fear was still buried deep inside me. Imagining Nick with his cold, calculating gaze being able to monitor me through a hidden camera was terrifying. He had such an upper hand, and here I was finally having an opportunity to take that away from him. The moment I reached Samantha's house, I fainted into her arms as though the weight of these past months had completely crushed me. I was relieved. I had made it. I was finally safe, at least for now. I knew that Nick is not the type of man who would let me go so easily. Control was something that he spent years perfecting over me, and I was certain that he was not going to stop now. I am uncertain about what his next move can be, but one thing is for sure. I have to outsmart him if I ever want to taste freedom.